In the name of God, indeed, the compassionate and the merciful. May the peace and blessings of God be upon Muhammad and his blessed family and the chosen companions. Dearest brothers, Salamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. With another class on Islamophobia, we are with you. First, we must know who is behind Islamophobia. If we are talking about the West, what do we refer to when we say the West? Not everyone living in the West is an enemy of Islam. On the contrary, there are many people who embrace Islam and are in love with Islam and who are from the West. They are originally from the West. So we must know what is clashing against Islamic civilization and culture, and why is it doing so. So for that we must go study what the West is, or rather, thought in the West, which considers that Islamic culture and Islamic civilization are against it. So we must study it. Dear brothers, to understand well what the West is, you must have studied the history of Greece, the civilization of Greece, Hellenism. That history of the arrogant polytheistic kings. And indeed from there, when they arrive at pre-Christian Roman civilization, how did they dominate Alexander the Great? How did he dominate the land? How did he want to impose his culture on all cultures? How did Alexander the Great impose that culture, that civilization on the other side? How did he force everyone to worship their gods and deities? So you need to study a bit of history to understand the roots of that culture. For this reason, you will see that the capital has the same sculpture, that architecture of ancient Greek Rome. It means we insist on it. Even for you to understand how deeply rooted today's Western thoughts are with pre-Christian Rome. You can see Hollywood movies that proudly talk about the heroes, the deities of ancient Rome, about Hercules, about Thors, about many other things that are from that culture and civilization. They make movies, invest millions of money, millions of dollars to, we can say, resurrect that thought, that culture, that civilization. So you will see many of the roots of today's Western thought, of what is said about individual freedom, the pursuit of individual pleasure, having a democracy, libertinism, freedom for gays, many other things that you will see in the West. When you study the history of Nero, the history of other Roman kings, and there you will find it. What I can recommend is that you go study hedonism, which was a philosophical thought of ancient Rome that sought pleasure everywhere and for everything, what today is called satisfaction everywhere. So when you are going to understand it, and there you will understand the roots of this clash between two civilizations or two cultures, or between the West and what they call the East. A little further on, you will see that in the East there was a very religious culture that was of the Persians. So the Persians, when they came to power, always protected the believers. For example, you can study how the Persians treated the Jews, who were monotheists, and how the Romans treated the Jews, who were monotheists. You will see that a Syrian king, who is the king of Persia, comes to give asylum, protection, and liberation to the Jewish people who are in exile. He is practically going to save them because he is a king of Persia who are believers. On the other hand, when Alexander the Great comes and dominates the Holy Land, there will be, we can say, the struggle against Judaism, against the Jews. He kills them. He destroys them. The Romans completely destroy everything that are religious and sacred symbols of the Jews. Even at one time, within that Hellenistic culture of Alexander the Great of Greece and after Rome, they want to impose all their false polytheistic beliefs on the Jews who were monotheists. So he himself will open your eyes so that you understand two different cultures, one culture of Persia, of ancient Iran, of the believers who sought to raise the flag in the name of God on earth, and others who raised the flag of the arrogant. I do not say that the kings of Persia were always good people. No, no. I say, those are roots, the roots. When you study the roots, you will understand where the culture comes from, where everything that is happening today comes from. So you will see for centuries confrontations between Persian Iranian civilization and Roman civilization, even earlier between the Greeks. Those from Greece, from Alexandria, from Alexander the Great, and also against the Persians when Alexander the Great comes and is going to burn Persepolis and destroy it. We are talking about 3 centuries before Christ, around there. And a little further on, you will see that here, in that part of the land, Islam will arrive. And quickly Islam will be spread throughout what is today called the Middle East. North Africa, Arabia, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Iran, and from there it expands. When Islam arrives in Iran, suddenly how is it that one will find a source of energy? That is to say, Iranians become promoters of Islam and will spread Islam everywhere. It is very interesting to know about the 6 correct books of the Sunni school. Most of those Sunni writers are Iranians. They are Persians. Among others, you will see that sometimes they are all Iranians. Only one is this Arab, the rest are Iranians, who will even expand Sunni culture. Therefore, those Iranians, those Persians, have had that influence throughout history. I am not in favor of races or things like that. No. It is just that when we study, the truth is, have been influential. Due to cultural characteristics, roots of faith, and among thousands of other things. You know that a culture suddenly comes from thousands of years. Iran is the country that has had the oldest civilization in human history. There is a city called Ciudad Quemada. It has a history of more than 7,000 years. Imagine, that is to say, before 7,000 years. When humans in much of the earth were nomadic, scattered in the mountains, in Iran there were cities and civilizations, laws, government, state. Imagine. So, you will see that when Islam arrives in Iran, Islam will strengthen in such a way that it becomes a great civilization and is clashing again. And one of the clashes that Islam has against the West is the division between the Eastern Roman Church, which will be the Orthodox Church, and the Western Roman Church, which will be the Catholic Church. Imagine, that division is due to, I can say, the reaction of both churches in front of Islam. One is the subject of criticism from Muslims that the Orthodox Church has to change some positions. For example, they remove the images in the Western Orthodox Church. They remove the images, and among thousands of things, they have to make some modifications to be able to resist against the Muslims, although the Catholic Church continues to worship images because they are far from the Muslims. Even the matters of theology and ideology are different. For example, in the East, in the Orthodox Church, there is much talk about the essence of God, the divinity of Jesus, the Holy Trinity, because they are always criticized by Muslims. That is to say, even the ideology in the East is formed based on religion. As a reaction against the criticisms of Muslims, because they always have to present there, Jesus is indeed a Son of God. Jesus is a part of the Trinity. But in the East, they say that, yes, it is very clear. Jesus is a part of the Trinity, that there is no need to discuss it. Let's talk about the essence of sin, salvation, and other things. That is to say, these matters are already resolved, that Jesus is God and that he is already part of divinity. The Trinity is already resolved for the West. So they begin to talk about the great theological concern in the West, in the Roman Catholic Church, which is to talk about salvation, sin, and the authority of the Church. But in the East, because they are always criticized and attacked by Muslims, they always have to react in a coherent way to the attack. Very well. So we see that these two cultures have always been clashing throughout history, not just today. And this leads to such a harsh confrontation that it will be titled the Crusades. And many times some think that the Crusades were a struggle of the Catholic Church against the Muslims. False. False. The first Crusades, we are talking about 1091 to 1993. The majority of the victims of the Catholic attacks were from the Orthodox Church, from the Byzantine Church. Yes, dear brother, if you didn't know, now you do, that in the First Crusade, those who died and were attacked were cities of the Orthodox. Yes, of the Eastern Christians. They were the victims. This means that the beginning of that attack of those crusades was them. Even many people interpret the wars largely as between the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church. Even today, that great clash that always exists between the United States, the Western Church, and the Russians, the Orthodox Church. Do you see? And everyone says it has nothing to do with religion. Yes, it does, brother. It does have to do. It means you cannot overlook the religious roots that are at the bottom of all this. It means that even the Protestants who fought against the Catholics for so many centuries, when they face the Orthodox, are united, Protestants and Catholics. You will see NATO. They are Protestants, Catholics, and secularists united against the Russian Orthodox. Do you see? It is very clear what is being talked about. So you will see that clash that has always existed throughout history. It is not something of the new century. And always the Catholics, meaning the Roman Church, have done everything possible to discredit the Eastern Church and the Muslims. And in their works they insisted that the Prophet of Islam is not a prophet. God. We rely on God to say this thing, but we will explain it so that you understand. From the beginning, they did everything possible to say that what the Prophet of Islam received as revelation was not a revelation from an angel, Gabriel, but rather an inspiration from a devil. They mount 11 lies to attack Islam. That is to say, it is not from today. This has been going on since the Crusades, even thousands of other lies that they created. Dear brother, that confrontation is not from today. That clash is not from today. And it did not start today. It has roots in ancient civilizations. Iran, Persia, and the West, Rome, Greece. So they always come during history when the borders come closer. That clash will be stronger, more powerful. When the Muslims take all of North Africa, then the clash will be stronger. When the Muslims arrive in Andalusia, that clash between Islam and the Husayn will be even more powerful. When you see that the saints will be Matamoros, the saint of Matamoros, look for the name of Santiago de Compostela. They call him Matamoros, like Matamoros. That title they give is very derogatory. And he starts to say, invent stories about how Santiago appeared. He wrote, Santiago indeed the son of Jose Cairo, father of Jesus. That is to say, just as the Bible says, although it is not according to the list. But then they invented stories, they invented shrines. You will see, the sanctuary of Santiago de Compostela is an invented sanctuary for Islamophobia. To fight against Muslims, do you understand me? So much of the religious literature in the West has been shaped as part of Islamophobia, to fight against Muslims, even sects. And we are going to talk a lot about that. For example, there is the sect of Mercedarians. Look for the Mercedarians. And when you ask them why did they form this sect, it is like a section of the Catholic Church. So they say to save ignorant Christians victims of attacks by Muslims. That if Muslims are going to convert you to Islam, to free them from Islam, that if you are for Islamophobia, fighting against Islam, they have formed religious orders in the Catholic Church like the Mercedarians. So, how to do it? Imposing dictators and kings and keeping corrupt kings as long as the West can. it will maintain them in Islamic countries. That is why you will see stories of many dictatorships in Egypt, in Iran. In Persia, you will see a Pahlavi regime, the Pahlavi dynasty. Reza Shah arrives, the first king of that dynasty, thanks to the English. Then he will be removed by the English and his son will come in his place, and then he will be maintained by the Americans. Imagine being 100% dependent on the West. So the dictators, corrupt kings, and there will always be so much pressure, lack of freedom within Islamic countries. And everyone is only thinking about freeing themselves from that foolish dictator who is in charge and sucking all the money for himself and his family. And there are always fights. There is always revolution in Islamic countries, and the revolutionary leaders are suppressed. When a person enjoys not the slightest bit of freedom in their country, then the only thing that matters is to fight for their liberation, like in Egypt. Always Muslim brothers, always this, that. Anwar Sadat, Hosni Mubarak, among other dictators, come to power and will establish a total dictatorship like Saddam Hussein. And all of this comes with the support of the West. Nowadays, the system in Saudi Arabia who brought them to power, the English. Look for Lawrence of Arabia, who brought the Saudis in Saudi Arabia and brought them to power. A family of Jewish origin brought the Saudis to power in Saudi Arabia. The English, Lawrence of Arabia, who was an Englishman, an English spy. So you will see that politically very corrupt systems in Islamic countries do not enjoy a democratic, correct, revolutionary Islamic system. Nothing. There are many countries, many that do not. Some countries that have an Islamic government and an Islamic republic. But they have nothing to do with the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, Islamic Republic, I don't know of what. The only one that actually has something of Islam now, not everything, is Iran. But it has something. It still lacks, we will say, in Iran, the same things also happen. When you already have that dictator in charge, you yourself help rebellions to always happen within that country. That is to say, that political instability will lead that country to a country of insecurity. Political instability, dictatorship leads to instability, insecurity in society. So, what happens? When there is no security in a country, there is no growth. It always remains held back. And you think that all that insecurity, all that instability in Muslim countries is by chance, or because Muslims are foolish. What do these embassies have to do with it? For example, the United States Embassy with more than 5,000 members, what is it doing in Iraq? What is it doing? It's a question. What does it have to do with the instability of this country? Among other embassies. United States Embassy, England Embassy, many embassies. What are they doing in the East? Let's move forward. When the government is made up of the corrupt, not the illustrious, then those who come to power, to Congress, to the Senate, and the laws they issue are not in favor of the people. It is a self-interested group, and the only thing it seeks is its own interest. And they will set rules, not to develop the country, but to keep it well controlled. And many times these controls will cause the country to fall far behind, to guarantee the interests of those elites who are already in charge. And then, within these rules that are not Islamic at all, and largely not even Western, they are outdated rules to keep the country backward. It means that it neither reaches, for the most part, Western norms, nor reaches Muslim countries. It has neither Islamic norms, nor does it have, for example, in Egypt. There are some individual marriage norms, things like that, and they are from Islam. But for the most part, what Islamic politics is, which is to liberate the people and help a people to develop, never reaches politics. So useless norms and laws are part of that project to keep Muslims backward. And from there we go to the system. The most important thing about a system is education. Education, so that the new generation can educate themselves in a healthy way and become great scientists and free thinkers, wise. But you will see that great Muslim countries have been kept far away. Except for the Islamic Revolution. After the Islamic Revolution, it is a completely different story. It is a new renaissance of Islam in the world. It's another matter. But the rest of the Islamic countries are quite behind in science. How many times have you seen an Egyptian or someone from Turkey say that the Turks have advanced so much in nanotechnology? Why? The Turks are very naive. But why? You will see that in their universities, they do not allow them to touch the finest technologies in the world. What is most important today? So the educational system is quite backward in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in many of the countries. Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a Muslim country with more than 160, 180 million Muslims. In just Bangladesh, there are more Muslims. In Pakistan, if we combine Bangladesh and Pakistan, there are about 300 million Muslims. Much more, it's roughly triple that of Mexico. Imagine that. So Muslims have always been kept away from technology. Muslims should worry about the latest female singer, the latest dancer, those silly things. And one of the most important factors that has kept Muslims very far behind is distancing the lives of Muslims from the life and conduct of the Prophet of Islam. It means just carrying the name of Islam, nothing of Islamic practice. It means keeping Muslims away from spirituality. Let's see. First, fighting against the identity of Muslims. What is your identity as a Muslim? The Holy Quran needs to be read. In what language is it? It is in Arabic script, in the Arabic language. So Muslims need to be disconnected from the Arabic language. So for example, in Turkey, they removed the Arabic alphabet and introduced the Latin alphabet. A boy who has studied even up to a doctorate will never learn to read the Quran because he has not learned the alphabet. In Turkey, Ataturk, the great dictator, the corrupt. In Iran, the Shah already came to do all this. And what did they do? For example, they fought against the Islamic veil. When you remove the Islamic veil, what does it mean? You strip the woman and you will insist that women should have sexual relations everywhere. You insist on everything that leads a society to moral decay. In Iran and Turkey, for example, they prohibited religious people from wearing religious clothing. Why? Because it is a religious authority. When there is authority, there is someone who can defend Islam. When we are going to eliminate that authority, there is no longer anyone who can officially defend Islam. What else? In Iran, they prohibited crying for Islam Hussein a.s. There is even a lot of history to tell about the Islamic veil, when women already protested at the shrine of Islam Hussein asking for their right to freedom to wear the hijab. They just wanted to wear their own religious clothing, their hijab. Shah, the pro-Western dictator, came and ordered killing of all those people who had come to the shrine. It is said that about 14,000 people, women and men, had come protesting in favor of the hijab, the Islamic veil, and they were completely massacred. You will never see this massacre in the West of the Guharshad Mosque, of the Shrine of Reza, where tens of thousands of protesters were killed. 10 people will die in the West. Everyone says they have already died, but these pro-Western dictators massacre tens of thousands in a single day. Nothing happens, and you will never read anything like this in history books, that a pro-Western dictator in Iran, in the holy city of Mashhad, in the shrine of Momneta, killed tens of thousands just because they were asking for their right to freedom to wear the Islamic veil. Well, so that is like a struggle to remove Islamic identity in Islamic countries. What else? They supported free thinkers. But in reality, they were not free thinkers, but people we call brainwashed in the West. People who had not properly read Islam and had filled their heads with all Western philosophy. And their mission was to fight against Islam. They presented that idea. Why are Muslims so backward? They did not say because the West already has the government in hand, because the governors are corrupt, because the law is not Islamic, because we do not put Islam into practice. None of that. Because we are Muslims, we are backward. That idea that this backwardness is due to Islam is the fault of Islam. Islam is the most useless thing that exists because we are Muslims, we are backward. Because our women wear the Islamic veil, we are backward. That religion is the most useless, Islam is the most useless, and it keeps society very backward. And among thousands of other lies, even for example today in Afghanistan, what they have instilled in the minds of the youth, everything has that idea. Having a government related to Islam means Taliban, Al-Qaeda, that backwardness, and we never want that. Even believing relatives say so. A little further on, you will see that the educational system is a system that controls young people to ensure and guarantee ethical, moral, and spiritual corruption of the youth. In the East, yes. It means they did everything possible for the boys to lose all Islamic values. Increasing nightclubs, concerts, dance venues, prostitution, everywhere. Today, more than Iran, in any Muslim country you go to, there are nightclubs with the best quality of service from prostitutes. In Turkey, in the Arab Emirates, previously in Syria, in Iraq, in some places. Even in Saudi Arabia, they talk about their places. In Egypt, which is very famous, Cairo is a nightlife spot. Cairo, when you talk about Cairo, it's worse than Persia and Colombia. Imagine that. So, when you only carry the name of Islam, you have none of the good benefits of Islam. And when they tell you, look, all the bad you have is from Islam, and you say, oh, the truth is, yes, because I carry the name of Islam without practicing it, I am suffering so much, then it starts, I can say, to immerse that doubt. If I leave Islam, will I develop? That is what has been drilled into the heads of many young people for centuries. So, they are told this, if the truth of Islam is so good, why are they so backward? It's a lie. Afghanistan is the example of Islamic government. It's a lie. Zahir Shah, the king, was Western. Then Al-Qaeda, it was a power raised by the Westerners. Taliban, in some way it was controlled by the intelligence system of the Pakistani army. There it is, there. And then that intelligence service was directly connected to the accident. What does it have to do with Islam? Guys, let's see. Not everything that has a beard and turban is religious. Bin Laden was not religious at all. It has nothing to do with Islam. A guy who was born in the United States was a CIA intelligence agent and then dressed up. It means now you have to play the role of the dumb terrorist Muslim. And he did it well. There is even a Hollywood movie that features Bin Laden dancing with George W. Bush. It's a comic book movie that came out in the United States, and it means that they were always together, they are always hand in hand and always together. So guys, look, let's see. That education system, these doubts they put in the kids' heads. Why? If Islam is so good, why are they so backward? It's Islam's fault. That's a lie. If Islam is so good, the Westerners who are so advanced and do not have Islam, do you see? If Islam were necessary, Westerners should be very backward. The West is paradise, the United States is paradise. It's a lie. If religion and religious people are good, why is there so much war in the East? There is war because there is your embassy, because there is your military base. That's why there is war. Do you understand me? So you are going to reach that point. If the law is good, why does the law only bring violence? An example of this is Saudi Arabia, ISIS, other criminals who, when they are going to commit a crime, say in the name of God, in the name of God's law. So you will see a step further, raising and educating all the university elites in the West. It means that the elite in Islamic countries has been educated in the West. They feel an ethical, moral debt to the West. It means that I have my entire identity from the West, so I have the moral obligation to defend the West with everything it has. So there will be a large part of the university students in many Islamic countries, those who have studied in the West, when they return to their countries, will be disseminators of the entirety of Western culture. In terms of clothing, even when they talk to young people, they say, oh, look, paradise is the West. All that is good is the West. Because all their identity is from the West. If you are going to destroy the West, where did you study in the West? Then you have nothing. They already say, my degree is from such a university in the West. Ah, he comes from London. He is very wise. And these elites will do everything possible to empty the Islamic countries of the elites. If they find a distinguished young man who is very wise, they say, go to the West. And the boy goes and integrates into Western culture. He integrates into the Western system. Many intelligent young Afghans, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, Egyptians, Indians, and Turks already live in the West. Great scientists, great wise people. When there are no wise people in a country, the country falls behind. It's normal. When it is elite, it is always promoting, leave the country, and the country is left with the ignorant. It's normal. That's another thing. Emigration, making the wise emigrate. Now, in foreign countries, I will tell you, you don't know that. If a wise person, if a scientist goes to a Western embassy, they will not grant a visa to ordinary people. In Iran, for example, you go to the French embassy, they do not give you a visa to visit Paris. They say, an Iranian, what do they have to do with Paris? It's like a tourist. No, bring that bank statement, bring everything. They impose thousands of conditions in such a way that they make it impossible for you to travel to their country. To give you an idea, Qomi has never set foot on Spanish territory. Strange, right? Why don't they give me the visa? Never. They have never given it to me. Because if I go and they say there is a visa, why is there? They impose many conditions, and in the end, they do not give you the visa. Imagine that. That's how it is, dear brother. But let's see. When a scientist, an illustrious young person, goes to those embassies, they will evaluate him. Oh, look, he is a scientist. What a shame that he stays in Iran. We are going to steal him for our countries. Yes, they will immediately give him a visa. They will give him, I don't know, support, scholarship, funding. They find him a good job in some company in the West, and that young person is gone. And who stays? Those who have not studied. It means that in those countries, the people with less education, with less utility, stay. The workers stay. And what else? If in these countries there is security, tranquility and stability, they will thrive. But when there is war, when there is fighting, they will always be left behind. How to make fights. What is the most powerful source of energy in the East? Religion. Oh well, we are going to use that fire, that is fuel. For what? We are going to start sectarian wars. Who can fight against whom? Let's see. Who do we have? Well, Muslims are either Sunni or Shia. Oh, very well. Let's start a Sunni-Shia war. And you will see during past centuries between the Ottoman Empire and the Safavid Empire, there was always a Sunni-Shia war. Why should Sunnis and Shias fight? Oh, when there is war, when the enemies are fighting. Right. So the Westerners are happy because whenever there is a struggle, it gets destroyed. One enemy destroys the other and everyone has to rebuild their country. Syria completely destroyed, Lebanon destroyed, Iraq destroyed, Afghanistan destroyed, Pakistan destroyed, Azerbaijan destroyed, internal wars, civil wars in Turkey destroyed. Interesting, right? Think that all of this is coincidence. Libya destroyed, Yemen destroyed, think that all of this is coincidence, that there are so many funded wars. Interesting. And you should study the role of the West in each of those wars. Are those, we can say, caused by the same Muslims? Or are the Muslim religious leaders behind them? That if the Shia say they send to kill the Sunnis, and the Sunnis, send to kill the Shia? Or are they just mobs of war provocation, that they are funded and supported by the West, totally supported by the West? That is why you will see the motto of the revolutionary leader of Iran. It is the unity among all Islamic schools. Even Iran finances the unification of Muslims. Sunnis and Shia can unite. So, always maintaining sectarian wars. It was one of the most important policies in recent times. They even imposed sects. They invented their own sects. Ahmad al-Hassan al-Yamani, Shirazi sect. There are many sects that fight among themselves. In Iraq, they will always fight because it says there the source of the energy of religion is a source that has no end. They can always fight. And there they are going to. So elsewhere you will see that a sect like Ibn Taymiyyah, in the background during the Crusades, they invented Ibn Taymiyyah, supported him, financed him. Ibn Taymiyyah is a madman who even raises the banner of war against the Sunni schools themselves. And the 4 judges from the 4 Sunni schools will condemn him to life in prison. And great works of Ibn Taymiyyah, the mad founder of Wahhabism, have been written in prison, so you have an idea. And a dogmatic form of Islam that comes from them, an Islam that no longer... The majority of Sunnis are Hanafis, who support intellectual Islam, and the Shia, who are all intellectuals, will appoint a dogmatic Islam of Ash'ari as representatives of Islam. Those who interpret the text literally. Imagine all the mosques in the West, who built them. They did. So Ibn Taymiyyah, Jama'at and Tabligh, who are other crazy fundamentalist Salafists, and then they will be representatives. And then they, that is to say, generally in Sunni countries, will instill Shia-phobia towards Shia Islam, and among the Shia they instill phobia towards Sunnis, even insulting the companions of the Prophet of Islam, insulting what is sacred among the Sunni school. Of course, there are differences, but there is no need to turn differences into fights. The fights are for the madmen, but the West has always kept these fights alive. Imagine, it has financed them to create conflicts. And with all that, we conclude that talk. In that part, the West has done everything to keep Muslims controlled. When it is going to control them so they do not advance, then it says, do you know whose fault it is? It is Islam, and there it will teach it. From the media, elites, people who study in the West, everything. And in the end, everyone thinks, the truth? Yes. What will be the solution? To abandon the Istan. It means they will tell you, if you abandon what is the most powerful, what is the key to your salvation, you will lose it, then you will be saved. A lie. But this is indeed a bitter reality. In the next class, we will talk about how the West has done everything possible to instill in the minds of Muslims that if Islam enters politics, it means war. And this is the end of Islamic countries, so we will talk about how the West fought against political Islam in the East. May God bless you. Thank you very much for participating in this class. Don't forget to share it with other friends so they can see it and leave your comment. Thank you very much. May the peace and blessing of God be with all of you.